Recording now. So this is, as you saw, is broken out into units, and now we're working on module 4 of unit 1. This is the cloud computing and assessment tools. So introduction to cloud computing. So with cloud computing, a model for enabling convenient on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort or service provider interaction. All cloud resources are available online so that users from virtually anywhere around the world can access them. IAC, so you're going to see these a lot. You'll see like SaaS, like SaaS, and whenever you see those lowercase a's, they mean as. Infrastructure as a code enables software developers to effectively order up the needed infrastructure from the cloud service provider by simply executing a script. Okay. Cloud computing advantages, characteristics, explanation. On-demand self-service. The consumer can make changes, such as increasing or decreasing computer resources, without requiring any human interaction from the service provider. Universal client support. Virtually any network device, desktop, laptop, smartphone, tablet, etc., can access the cloud computing resources. Invisible resource pooling. The physical and virtual computing resources are pooled together to serve multiple simultaneous consumers, which are dynamically assigned or reassigned based on the consumer's needs. The customer has little or no control or knowledge of the physical location of these resources, which is, on that one, in my opinion, is a good and bad thing. Immediate elasticity. Computing resources can be increased or decreased quickly to meet demands. Metered services, fees are based on computing resources used, which again is a double-edged sword. It depends on how they run their fees. Some of those will run per user, some of those will run per resource. So you really need to pay attention to your contracts. Types of clouds. You have a public cloud. This is one in which the services and infrastructure are offered to all users with access provided remotely through the internet. A community cloud is open to only specific organizations that have common concerns. Private cloud is created and maintained on a private network. This offers the highest level of security and control, but reduces cost savings. And that's because basically they have to curtail everything to your needs. A hybrid cloud is a combination of a public and private cloud. And with those, what they usually do is they'll have like a front-facing public, and then they'll have a back-facing private for their main, like for example, you'll have like an internet and an intranet in a lot of things. And the intranet is where all your staff resources are. This is kind of the same thing. When you work with the hybrid cloud, the public, you have your public side and your public access, and then the private side is where you put all your resources that you only want secured people having access to. Cloud architecture. So cloud architecture includes, oh, good. I'm glad it's actually making sense to people. Thin clients is a computer that runs from resources stored on a central cloud server instead of localized hard drive. Now, for a long time, I was like, why do they call them thin clients? Basically, because the computers are very small and they don't, it's kind of like the difference between a laptop and a Chromebook is how I remember this. So a lot of the resources are in the cloud and instead of on the actual hardware. So they don't have as much oomph as a regular. Yeah, I said the bad word, ew, Chromebook. So the computers don't have as much oomph as a regular computer would, because most of the resources are shared and in the cloud. Transit gateway, an Amazon Web Service, AWS technology that allows organizations to connect all existing virtual private clouds, or VPCs, physical data centers, remote offices, and remote gateways into a single managed source. Serverless infrastructure. The capacity, planning, installation, setup, and management are all invisible to the user because they're handled by the cloud provider. Now, you'll see this in places Sometimes it'll be a like a small or medium business that has a really, really small IT department. And they need to be focusing on different sections. So like they don't have a network administrator or something like that. So basically they're using a third party to do all that for them, and the cloud provider does it for them. Yeah, thin is used for they're not really high quality. They're smaller tasks. You're not going to see Photoshop or something that takes a lot of space on a thin client. It's basically like a word processing type computer for basic office stuff. Yeah, remember what I said about SaaS, PaaS, and all that? Here you go. Software as a service, SaaS, a cloud computing hosted software environment that eliminates any software purchase, installation, maintenance, upgrades, and patches, which can be good. But when you also think about the fact that you are also paying subscription fees for that as well. Platform as a service, PaaS, provides a software platform on which the enterprise or user can build their own applications and then host them on the PaaS provider's infrastructure. PaaS allows a moderate degree of control for the enterprise over the cloud computing environment. Infrastructure as a service provides unlimited, quote, raw computing, storage, and network resources that the enterprise can use to build its own virtual infrastructure in the cloud. And then there's FaaS, or function as a service. And this is a serverless approach to execute modular pieces of code. Yeah, a lot of these you'll see, and something that I've seen is a lot of places don't opt for a pure environment of SaaS, PaaS, or they'll do chunks. Like certain departments will be SaaS, or things like that. You'll see they'll do it that way, but a lot of them originally would be like everything has to be this way. But since it's gotten a lot more approachable and more commonplace, you see people picking and choosing on which sections they actually need and want. So FaaS, I've never used FaaS myself, but FaaS is basically you have people that write your chunks of code, and you just give them the code, and you don't have to have any of like the servers or any of the things like that. You have basically all of the entire back end is taken care of by a third party, your provider, and they just take that raw modular pieces of code for whatever programs or whatever it is that you're running and make sure that it runs on everything else. Okay, polling activity. Faye is the company HR manager and wants to create a type of cloud that would only be accessible to the HR managers. Remember what I said about certain departments want certain things? Which type of cloud would best fit Faye's needs? Public cloud, group cloud, hybrid cloud, community cloud. Okay. So that one was kind of a trick question in the way that they worded it. A community cloud is one that they only have for specific organizations. They put group cloud in there because they were just trying to confuse people on the terminology, which was kind of crappy of them. But yeah, it's it was really a D. I'll just say everyone's keyboard broke, and all the B's were D's. So community cloud, group cloud, that I know that a lot of you were aiming for that, but group cloud does not exist. What you're aiming for is actually community cloud.
All I'm saying is a community is a group, therefore we were right.
Exactly. That's why I said it's one of those trick questions that makes me mad when they put answers like that in. Okay, 3-tier architecture. So tier 1 has your web server, 2 application server, and tier 3 is your database servers. Monolithic versus microservices architecture. So monolithic is out here on the end. It's user interface. You see that, and it goes business logic. Then it goes down to your application database. Sorry, I have a cat trying to start a fight behind me. Candair is your friend. And then on the microservices architecture, you have everything broken out into their own little microservice database, rather than having the entire application database in one big monolithic piece. Exactly. Mono equals one, micro equals tiny. That's it right there. So so they just have everything broken out into little itty bitty chunks there. And then monolithic means they just dump everything into one big database, and they better have it separated out within that database, which is why microserver architecture came about. Because if any of you have ever dealt with databases and tried to go into a database that has had several different iterations and several different people playing in it, it becomes a mess quickly.
I feel like this picture should have been done a little bit differently. Like the monolithic should have been like at least 3 or 4 times as tall as the micro.
Right.
Because to me,
Yes.
that literally looks like mono, one, micro, a bunch of ones.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I think this does kind of look like a misrepresentation. Yeah. But yeah, basically the whole thing is just saying monolithic means that there's one database, and micro means there's a whole bunch of little ones. So that's the key right there. Cloud computing comparison models. So there's the model, then there's the IT responsibility, and then there's the explanation. That's what we're going through here. So there's SaaS, there's a low responsibility for your IT department, and then the organization contracts with the cloud service provider for access to software, relieving the IT staff of any responsibilities. A lot of times on that, whenever you get a full SaaS, it means that you have a very small IT department, and usually you have higher level IT staff instead of having like tiered IT staff where you have like 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll see that a lot of the times on those you have like 3 and 4, and the lower tiers are actually taken care of by the cloud provider rather than on the rest of the IT staff. PaaS, that's medium IT responsibility. The IT staff has moderate duties of creating the platform, but once completed, the duties are just diminished. And a lot of times with PaaS, you'll see they'll contract out a big like fleet of people when they're first building it, and then lay them off, and then have their minimized staff to take care of things. So that's how that happens a lot of the times. IaaS, that is a high IT responsibility, because designing, building, and monitoring the virtual environment relies on the IT staff. So they have to do all of it. And then FAS, that's low responsibility. The cloud service provider manages microservice databases and backend services. So remember that picture here. So all of this stuff gets managed by them, and you just give them you just dump your code and stuff in there, and then it runs the wrong way. Does that make sense? Yeah, IaaS is very difficult. You don't see that a whole lot, especially you'll see chunks of that. Like they'll do like projects like that, or sometimes you'll see departments like that, but I haven't seen entire organizations, at least not in the small medium business area. And there might be some really big ones that have things like that, but I don't see a lot of that in the things that I've dealt with. It is out there.
The government will, at least for the air defense systems I used, they used a subscription slash platform as a service.
Mhm.
And what they would do is they would contract out to whatever big contractor won the highest bet for the lowest, least effective product.
Typical
But they
government,
would,
yeah.
yeah, they would basically they would design a system, make it where the system wouldn't play with anything else unless you went to them for pass-throughs that you
Mhm.
would then have, and then they would spend a few years designing the system, uh, get these giant design teams. Once the system was designed, reduce it down to micro staff, and then whenever they had updates or anything, they would hire people on and push them out to go and go around the country
Teach
to the
everyone, and
different,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's, and that model you see a lot in military and the three-letter agencies. And because they do that contract and reduce, because they don't want to pay a full force to stay there for the entire time. You do see that quite a bit. Cloud vulnerabilities. Okay, this is the fun stuff. A particularly serious potential cloud vulnerability regards a lack of key management. So our security issues on the left and descriptions on the right. Unprotected storage. Improper cloud security configurations can result in data being left exposed. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but if you've monitored any of the security news websites in the past, do you guys remember any of the ones where they'd have such and such AWS, big Amazon database that someone did not protect properly, and they just like copied the whole thing and dumped just gigs and gigs of data out there? Have any of you seen any of those? This is exactly how they did that. They did not have, they did not have, which is also why a lot of Amazon and a lot of the other ones, they started forcing their baselines to be a lot higher, because before, I think they had, I think they had a little bit more confidence in people setting their security stuff up correctly than they really should have. And instead of setting it high and letting them move it down, they set it low, and with predictable. Yes, exactly. Cough, Alexa, cough. Yes, they really should have gone with zero trust on that. And that's a big part of why zero trust has come into the industry. Logging and monitoring invisibility. Organizations generally cannot access or have limited or no visibility into the security mechanisms of the cloud provider, and thus cannot monitor and verify the effectiveness of security controls or view logging records. And unless you get a subpoena, it can be really difficult. And even then, if you guys remember us talking about the stuff a little bit, the loopholes that you can get through are large. And if the servers or any of the things are in another country, that adds another fun step. Insecure application program interfaces, APIs. Well, APIs help cloud customers customize their past by providing data recognition, access, and effective encryption. Any vulnerable API can be exploited by threat actors. So people tend to forget that everything has to be updated, including their APIs. Compliance regulations. Maintaining compliance requires that an organization know where their data is, who can access it, and how it is protected. But this can be difficult in an opaque cloud system where transparency is lacking. And also, if you think about for a second, the huge data, the structures that you have for Amazon and Google and how they're all across the country. Well, it's not just the country anymore. There's platforms that are all across the world. And if they are keeping these controls and logging records, and you have no way of knowing if these are actually overseas or if you have other issues like that. So you could be in breach of a compliance regulation because your information could actually be being stored outside of the country and you don't know it.
just best to assume that it's outside the country because it's going to be stored wherever it's cheapest to store.
Exactly. And that's another one of those, don't assume the best when it comes to these. It's one of those hope for the best, prepare for the worst situations. It's always best to just put in that step to make sure that you are covered in the long run. And then there's system vulnerabilities. Cloud infrastructure is prone to system vulnerabilities due to complex networks and multiple third-party platforms. Part of the problem is that when you get those, you may get information about their stuff, but what happens to the third-party contractors that they have that are working on there? Well, that just because you have information about, all of their information and you have this, it doesn't mean that you have any information about who any particular contractors are that also work with them. A lot of big companies have third parties and contractors that they work with. In fact, I don't know any IT place that doesn't do that. It's kind of difficult to do that, or else you don't have products you can use. And the bigger they are, the more third party and contractor people they have. So I think it's best to always assume that you are not getting a full list, because they might add someone later, they might forget, you don't know. So you don't know what they've got on there. They might add chunks to their network later on, so it may become more complex. So it's always best, like I said, hope for the best, plan for the worst. Knowledge check. What does serverless mean in cloud computing? The cloud network configuration does not require any servers. Server resources of the cloud are inconspicuous to the end user. Servers are run as VMs. All appliances are virtual and do not interact with physical servers. Just take your best guess. I have a feeling these are going to be the let's put in some terms to throw people off questions. So couple more guesses. Okay, let's see. Server resources are inconspicuous to end users, what they wanted people to say. So, right? Yeah, I'm with you, Stephen. I think that they word these questions very poorly, so don't. I don't grade on these, so don't worry about it. Vulnerability diagnostic tools. Vulnerability assessments, security professionals. A vulnerability assessment consists of a basic automated software scan used to identify flaws within a system. Other professionals, a major process that comprises a range of sub-processes that deal with identifying, quantifying, and ranking discovered vulnerabilities, as well as mitigating or eliminating vulnerabilities. Software analysis. The software development process involves software engineers writing source code using programming language that is then compiled into binary machine code. Static analysis, security testing that occurs before the source code is compiled. One thing to remember, static and dynamic. For some reason, there are some people that have a difficult time with this. Just remember, static is stored, non-running code. Dynamic is running. That's the easiest way to remember it. So dynamic analysis or runtime verification, security testing that occurs after the source code is compiled when all components are integrated and running. It is more difficult to find flaws because at that time, everything's running and in motion. Fuzzing provides a random input to a program to attempt to trigger exceptions and records the input that triggered the exception. They actually have special programs for fuzzing that that will just randomly throw things in to help you do this. Exceptions include memory corruption, program crashes, or security breaches. Reverse engineering, this is disassembling and analyzing a product. Basically, it's just going from the product as a whole and then taking it apart. That's how reverse engineering for anything works. All right. What type of analysis occurs before the source code has been compiled? Dynamic, static, compiled, decompiled. Give you a hint, the top two are the only answers that really matter. Good job, static. Nessus, oh, I love Nessus, Tenable's Nessus. If you haven't used it, and I highly suggest if you get a chance to give this one a try. One of the most popular tools for examining an infrastructure for vulnerabilities. Advantages, this is an open source vulnerability scanner that uses Common Vulnerability Scoring System, the CVSS. Modular architecture consists of centralized servers, which conduct scanning, and remote client agents, which interact with the servers. Nessus attack scripting language, or NASL, detects security vulnerabilities in local and remote hosts and identifies missing security updates and patches. Compatible with a variety of different computers and servers, and supports Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and Unix operating systems. Basic steps for installing and running Vulnerability Scan on Nessus. So you download it, install it. There's a bunch of different plugins depending on what you're doing that you can install and run. There are scan templates. So a lot of times you'll go out and look at your templates and go, okay, this is the type of one I want. And then you can customize those templates. And then you determine what type of scan settings you want. I love Nessus. Honestly, I really enjoy Tenable's products as a whole. They also have another product that they have that's a patch automation system. That is really cool. Like I did a whole bunch of research for our company about like the different automation systems, like Sophos had one and a bunch of different ones. And these guys just had one that was absolutely killer. So they make great products. Now Nessus has, when you use this, it has a fantastic, let me see if we've got a, there we go. So here are some of the plugins they've got. And as you can see, they're really great on labeling everything. It's easy to read. There's a lot of different ones that have come after Nessus and used them as kind of a template. So it's been a really good one for other people to create stuff that's similar. And on its, when you run your scans, it gives you these cool little like pie chart looking things, and it'll have like different color codes and stuff. And you can go out and like click on like things. It's like, hey, this one's got like bright red, which is bad. And you go, okay, well, that's obviously bad. And you click on it and it'll run you through all the things about this is the vulnerability and this is what's going on and this is how you fix it. And it's just fantastic. Google Chrome sucks. Yeah. But yeah, the critical and high ones, it's really good at that. That's the first time I used it. That was how I actually caught out some people that had lied to me and told me, no, we aren't using any versions of Windows that are not end of life. And I actually found a Windows XP system on the network, unpatched, with unencrypted financial data on it. And I had to come apart. So this is a very, very good, yeah, what's wrong with that? Yeah, that's kind of what their reaction to me was. And I was so floored that I just sat there and was like, just couldn't say anything for a few minutes. So yeah, it's a great tool to give you the information to say, here's what's wrong. So as a security professional, it is quite nice. So this is what your basic network scan looks like. And as you can see, it gives you lots of different things to configure. And here's what I was talking about. See your vulnerability, your critical, high, medium, low, and that blue, that's just giving you information. And this, I love this one. It brings all of your details up. I am someone that's like, that's great. but I need more. So they have, as you can see, links, and you can go and look at more stuff. I always loved that they had that in there. Yeah, there's that. I found all sorts of things that I was like, why is this even there? You can't even explain to me why it's there. And this was really fantastic about that. Okay, vulnerability details. So the vulnerability details page displays a description of the vulnerability and, my favorite thing, a solution to the problem on the center pane. A right pane gives the plugin details such as its severity, version, and dates published and modified. Also contains an area called risk information, which is of primary importance and lists 2 numeric scores. The CVSS base score represents the characteristics of the vulnerability when it was first discovered. The CVSS temporal score reflects the current characteristics of a vulnerability that may have changed over time. And I love that because you can be like, so when it was first discovered, it was here, and since then, it's now here. So as a security professional, it gives you a lot to stand on, especially having those pieces of information and being able to graphically represent them to people that don't understand security is a big deal. And this tool is very wonderful to help you do that. Yeah, because it's always been there. I don't know how many times I heard that as an IT person. It's always been that way. That is not a good answer. Which of the following is not true about Nessus? Don't feel bad if you don't know this. Nessus is an open source vulnerability scanner that uses CVSS. Nessus has a modular architecture consisting of centralized servers which conduct scanning and remote client agents which interact with servers. Nessus can detect security vulnerabilities in local or remote hosts and identify missing security updates and patches by simulating attacks to pinpoint vulnerability. Nessus only runs on Linux, Unix OS. I'm pretty sure they gave this one away. Yep. That one they made easy. I think they were making up for the other cruddy questions they had. Okay, CVSS base score exploitability metrics. Okay, so there's the metric, description, values, explanation, impact on base score. So this is going to be fun when we go through. So the metric, attack vector, description, the type of network access necessary to exploit a vulnerability. And then there's your network adjacent, network, local, physical. This is based on how close or remote that is a really poorly worded section. This is based on how close or remote the threat actor must be in order to successfully launch an attack. That was a poorly worded sentence. The AV metric will be higher the more remote a threat actor can be in order to launch the attack. Basically, you want to make the person get closer and have to have more physical proximity in order to get to your stuff, because that makes it easy for you to catch them. So if you're say in Idaho and they're in China and they have absolutely no problem launching stuff, that's a definite problem. Attack complexity, the conditions beyond the threat actor's control that must exist in order to exploit the vulnerability. There's low and high. This is based on conditions that may require the threat actor to gather more information about the target. Less complex attacks generate a higher score. So this is those inverse ones. Privileges required, the level of privileges that are necessary for exploiting a vulnerability. None, low, high. This metric describes the level of privileges the threat actor must have before successfully exploiting the vulnerability. The highest score is when no privileges are required. So that's bad. If they can get in and just go whoop without any privileges, you definitely have some issues. User interaction, the requirement for a user other than the threat, not treat actor, that's supposed to say threat actor, to participate in the successful compromise of the vulnerability. None, and then there's required. This is based on whether the vulnerability can be exploited exclusively by the threat actor or if a separate user must also be involved. When no user interaction is required, this generates a higher score. The scope, the ability of the vulnerability in one software component to impact other resources. There's unchanged and changed. Whenever the impact of a vulnerability breaches a security boundary and impacts other components, a scope change occurs. When a scope change occurs, a higher score is generated. Yes, this is why you air gap. Yes, that is exactly why air gapping was created. CVSS attack vector base score exploitability metrics. Okay, metric, description, example. So network, the vulnerability is bound to the network stack and can be exploited at the protocol level across one or more routers. This is a vulnerability that is remotely exploitable so that the set of possible threat actors includes the entire internet. Example, a threat actor causes a denial of service attack by sending a specifically crafted TCP packet across a wide area network. Adjacent, the vulnerable component is bound to the network stack, but the attack is limited to the protocol level at the protocol level to a logical adjacent topology. An attack must be launched from the same shared physical, Bluetooth, or logical, like local IP subnet network, or from within a secure or otherwise limited administrative domain, such as a secure VPN or restricted network zone. An ARP or neighbor discovery flood leads to a DOS on the local LAN segment. Local, the vulnerability is not bound to the network stack, and the threat actor exploits the vulnerability by accessing the target system locally by accessing the system's keyboard, remotely through SSH, or through interacting directly with the user. So a social engineering attack sends a malicious email attachment and then tricks the user into opening it, is that one. And then lastly, physical. The attack requires the threat actor to physically manipulate the vulnerable component. The interaction could be either brief or persistent. A threat actor gains access to disk encryption keys after physically accessing the target system. We're not going to go through that one. Infrastructure. Tools that can be used for conducting an infrastructure vulnerability diagnosis. Open Vulnerability Assessment Scanner, or OpenVAS, Nexpose, and Qual. I always suck at this, so I think it's Qualys or Qualys. Web applications. So I used to do a lot with securing web applications, and they kind of make my eye twitch when I think about them. Tools can be used to diagnose vulnerabilities in web applications. Passive scanning performs passive scanning and examines each page of the web application delivered by the web server, and then looks at the HTML in response from the web application. Active scanning attempts to find other vulnerabilities by using known attacks against selected targets. Dynamic analysis searches for flaws from the outside of the application with no knowledge of the software structure or source code. Static analysis examines the web application code from the inside to look for common vulnerabilities such as SQL injection and cross-site scripting, as well as coding errors like buffer overflow and unhandled error conditions. OWASP Z-Act Proxy, or ZAP, a Java-based tool that allows testers to perform fuzzing, scripting, and other actions to attack web pages. See, this is what I was talking about. They have tools to help you with fuzzing on code. This is one that's specifically for web apps. You can run this on most operating systems that support Java. Networks, states of action when diagnosing networks for vulnerability. You're pretty much always going to see passive and active on vulnerabilities. So passive actions are by definition watching and listening, but are not performing any overt actions against the network. Active actions involve taking some type of action against the network or network server, generally includes causing packets to come into contact with the network. Searching for network vulnerabilities involves enumeration, which is the process of extracting a list of usernames, machine names, network resources, shares, and services from a network system. Operating system tools. NetStat, network statistics, provides detailed information about current network connections. Command line and utility included in virtually in all Windows operating systems. So you open like CMD and you can use NetStat and then, various commands with it to use it through like Windows. Provides network protocol statistics as well as network connections for TCP, network interfaces, and routing tables. So remember me saying NetStat, well, you do NetStat space, and then these are the switches that get this information. So for the switch -A, all active connections and the ports that the computer is listening on. This is definitely an active scan and it will hit all of those ports. And if they have anything listening for this, they'll know that you're scanning. -E, Ethernet data such as number of bytes and packets sent and received. -G, multicast group membership data. -N, active TCP connections, addresses and port numbers displayed numerically. -R, contents of routing table. -S, statistics by protocol. -N, redisplays data every N seconds until control 1C is pressed. Other OS system tools that can be useful in gathering network information: ipconfig, or if you're using Linux, just a second. You guys don't see this little guy much. This is Chunk, and I'm going to put him down because he has claws like fish hooks. Ow. Or ifconfig in Linux. Internet program protocol configuration is a tool that displays TCP/IP network connection data, such as the IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway for all network adapters. It also displays DNS information. RACERT can give basic information about the path that a packet takes, and then traceroute is the one in Linux. Ping is a network program to test whether a particular host can be reached. So when you're on like command, you'll see ping space dash and then like an IP address, and then you'll see either reply or unreachable, and that'll show that. NS lookup, this is name server lookup. Tool can be used to obtain the IP address or domain of a host. It's called dig in Linux. Oh no, I love Linux. That was pain because he jumped up and hooked his claw like a little right through the top of my arm, and it was not very comfortable. Okay, third-party tools, Nmap. We will be using this one in one of our classes later on. Network Mapper is an open source utility for network discovery and security auditing. Using IP packets, Nmap can determine what hosts are available on a network, what services the hosts are offering, what types of packet filtering or firewalls are in use. Can be used for OS fingerprinting as well as host scanning. Host scanning, discovering characteristics of specific host computer. It can quickly scan very large networks. HPing, a command line TCP/IP packet assembler and analyzer. Responder, a tool that can manipulate name resolution services to uncover sensitive information. These are what common like Nmap commands look like. The commands on the left, I'm not going to read them all, but you can see. Usually when you see anything, I will say CEH, at least when I took it, they had a section where they were like, what would this common Nmap command look like? So be aware, sometimes in certification exams, they do have these. They won't look for the whole IP address on a lot of the times. They'll use a random IP address. What they're actually looking for is your knowledge of those switches, like the -P, and wanting to know if like that one on there where you do the 1-100 and that you're after a range of ports or things like that. So this is actually a really good table, and there are, if you go out and type in Nmap cheat sheet, there are some really good PDFs out there that have just a whole range of these, and they're really great. Yeah, Nmap is really good. I use it in the ethical hacking course. You guys are gonna go through and use that. Wireless networks. In a traditional wired network, a well-defined boundary or hard edge protects data and resources. Network hard edge, and then there's blurred edges. Different tools can be used to diagnose or exploit wireless vulnerabilities. Hashcat, which we'll be using something like that in one of our classes tool. This is a tool for cracking password hashes. AirCrackNG, a tool for capturing wireless packets and attacking wireless networks. Reaver is a tool for cracking Wi-Fi protect setups, WPS pins. I know Hashcat's on, Kali Linux. I'm not sure if the other two are on there. They might be, and if not, they probably have options to download them. AirCrack. Oh, see, there's an option. There you go, right there. AirCrack is on Kali. I was going to say, I think it is, but I can't remember. Cloud infrastructure. Tools used to identify vulnerabilities in cloud platforms. Prowler, a command line tool for diagnosing vulnerabilities in services using the AWS cloud. That's the Amazon. Scout Suite, an open source multi-cloud security auditing tool that can be used to assess the security posture assessment of different cloud environments. And Pacu is another exploitation framework for AWS. What are the different types of clouds available? Okay, this is just one. That was one for you guys to know. So that's it for us. Now, before we go, do you guys have any questions over what we went over today? Is there anything that you're confused about? Are you guys doing okay? You just ready for today to end because it's Monday? What's a cloud? Monday. All right. Well, everybody, don't forget your tests are due tonight if you haven't done them. So go do those and do your Cengage stuff and have a good night. And let me know if you have any questions. Also, don't forget, you can ask Zach questions and set up meetings with him. He's a great resource. Guys, have a good night, okay?